I think this is on. Yes, excellent. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jonathan Ferner. I'm chair of the Department of Information Studies, as many of you know. It's really wonderful to see everybody here today for an event that's organised by our department's Diversity Council. I know you're very eager to hear from Professor Abdullah, and I don't want to eat into the short time that we have with her, but I did want to take this opportunity to briefly introduce information studies to those of you who might be encountering us for the first time. This isn't going to surprise you, we're very interested in the things that people do to or with information, whatever the context. We're interested in how information is created. We're interested in how it's collected, how it's organised, preserved and made accessible. But just as importantly, we're interested in how it's faked, how it's hidden, how it's ignored, how it's wasted and destroyed. Our work is guided by a mission statement that specifically invokes, and here I'm quoting, the principles of individual responsibility and social justice, an ethic of caring and commitment to the communities that we serve. So what does that mean in practice? Well, it means that we're committed to changing the world in ways that reduce divides between rich and poor, and between powerful and powerless, in ways that generate fairer distributions of social and cultural and economic and political opportunities, and in ways that build and maintain thriving communities in which basic human rights and freedoms are respected. We're committed to a future where members of all social groups enjoy equitable access to the information that they need to get their jobs done and to live their lives to the full. This is a future where everybody, not just an elite minority, is empowered to preserve their own artefacts and stories and ideas in the ways they wish and to the extent they wish. And this is a future where the actions of governments and corporations respect the rights of individuals and communities, rights to intellectual freedom, rights to privacy, and rights to cultural property. And I don't imagine I need to belabor the point that the need to determinedly pursue these goals is increasing in intensity in almost a daily basis. I'm very proud to be able to say that one of the leading lights in transformational information activism is my colleague in information studies, Professor Sophia Noble, whose monograph on racist and sexist bias in search engine algorithms is forthcoming from NYU Press. Sophia will be introducing you to Professor Abdullah, who will then take part in a conversation with my colleague Professor Ramesh Srinivasan, following which there'll be time both for Q&A and an interactive breakout session that's going to be hosted by UCLA librarian Johanna Chen-Chan. The plan is for us to finish up here about 4:30, is that right? 4:30 to 5, and then you're all invited to join us for a catered reception, which isn't going to take place here, it's going to take place in the GSENIS building, which is just next door, basically. You have to sort of wind your way around some excellent statues and related things. Again, thank you very much for coming, and I'm going to hand you over to Sophia.
Who can beat excellent statues? I'm so delighted to see you all, so many faces here, and want to thank you for coming as well. And you should know that the Department of Information Studies has been a leader as well in supporting the Black Lives Matter movement in terms of our own theoretical and research engagements. Many of the faculty in our department, in the early weeks that I joined this department about 3 years ago, were actively involved in generating a statement in support of evidence and You can find that statement at criticallis.com, and it's really intended to signal that our field, whether we know it or not, is highly implicated in engaging with the issues of marginalized communities, and more specifically in speaking back to the evidence that's used in pursuit of social justice. And those of you who are familiar with our department know that social justice is a part of our mission. And so there's no better person, and I can say that having met Professor Abdullah on a panel earlier this year, that she's a bomb, y'all. I mean, that's all I can say. She's fantastic. I love her. And I might secretly stalk her on Twitter. I don't know. It's possible. You don't know. So let me introduce Professor Srinivasan and also Professor Abdullah, and let's get it started. Professor Srinivasan studies the relationship between technology, politics, and societies across the world. He's been a faculty member at UCLA since 2005 in the Information Studies and Design Media Arts departments, and he's the co-founder of the UC-wide Digital Cultures Lab, exploring the meaning of technology worldwide as it spreads to the far reaches of our world. He is also the author of the book, Whose Global Village? Rethinking How Technology Impacts Our World with NYU Press. He's going to engage with Professor Abdullah and the rest of us today, and I know what is going to be an invigorating conversation. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Melina Abdullah. She is the professor and chair of Pan-African Studies at California State University, Los Angeles. She earned her PhD and MA from the University of Southern California in political science and her BA from Howard University in African American Studies. She was appointed to the Los Angeles County Human Relations Commission in 2014 and is a recognized expert on race, gender, class, and social movements. Professor Abdullah is the author of numerous articles and book chapters with subjects ranging from political coalition building to womanist mothering. Professor Abdullah is a womanist, scholar, activist, understanding the role that she plays in the academy as intrinsically linked to broader struggles for the liberation of oppressed people. Professor Abdullah is a leader in the fight for ethnic studies in the K-12 and university systems and was a part of the historic victory that made ethnic studies a requirement in the Los Angeles Unified School District. She was among the original group of organizers that convened to form Black Lives Matter and continues to serve as a Los Angeles chapter lead and contributes to the national leadership. She is co-host and co-producer of the weekly radio program Beautiful Struggle, which airs on KPFK, part of the Pacifica Radio Network. Dr. Abdullah also serves on boards for the Black Community, Clergy, and Labor Alliance, the California Faculty Association of Los Angeles, Los Angeles African American Women's Public Policy Institute, the Los Angeles Community Action Network, the National Association for Ethnic Studies, Reference Wellness Salon, and Strategic Concepts in Organizing and Policy Education. Melina is the recipient of many awards, which you can only imagine with that kind of a track record of service. Most recently, the 2016 Racial Justice Award presented by the YWCA, the 2016 Fannie Lou Hamer Award for Outstanding Community Service presented by the Coalition of Mental Health Professionals, the 2016 Fannie Lou Hamer Award presented by the National Conference of Black Political Scientists, the 2016 Sacred Sisters Award, the California Teachers Association Human Rights Award, the Ella Baker Award, the Freedom Now Award. She's got a lot of awards, y'all, okay? She's amazing. She was really even most recently recognized by LA Weekly as one of the top 10 most influential Los Angeles leaders. She was Urban Girl of the Year by Two Urban Girls, and one of the 15 fiercest sisters. And I just want to say, who doesn't want to be a fierce sister, okay? And you've seen her, I'm sure many of you, on MSNBC, CNN, TV One, ABC, PBS, KTLA, BET. There's so many, it's really a half an hour introducing this incredible rock star. She's like, kill it, I can't hear another word about myself. So please join me in welcoming Professor Melina Abdullah.
You forgot the 13th.
Also the 13th. Ask her about it.
All right, so we're gonna have a little conversation here. And we're going to start by chatting with one another for just a little bit. I have a few questions that I want our colleague and inspiration, Melina, to answer that we're going to converse about. And then we're going to open it up to all of you. So probably for the first 20, 30 minutes, we're just going to have a conversation, and then we'll open it up. I just wanted to mention how important it is to me right now to organize in these types of manners. And when we're part of these types of universities, you know, with our elite pedigrees and so on, all this cachet associated with it, it is so, so important to me on a very personal and fundamental level. And I believe all of you here to be of the world, to be organizing, to be engaged with the types of movements and publics that we care about, you know. And so this to me is the purpose of my research intellectually, but it's also the purpose of events like this. So let this not be a one-off. Let's keep doing it. Let's keep fighting this racist regime, and let's keep organizing. And that's just what I want to say, you know, from my heart. So I had two different opportunities by which I was exposed to Professor Abdullah. One was an event with Rosario Dawson and Tulsi Gabbard. I was there with my wife, and it was all about powerful women in shaping and impacting and transforming our consciousness. And Professor Abdullah blew them all away. All right, so that's the first. I mean, they were wonderful, but Professor Abdullah was speaking the voice of truth and consciousness in a way that was really powerful for both of us at that event. Another was on Democracy Now!, which Professor Abdullah has appeared repeatedly, numerous times, and this was with two wonderful, wonderful scholars and activists, or actually in one case activists, Dolores Huerta from United Farm Workers and Dr. Cornel West. And the sharpness and clarity of Professor Abdullah's vision and voice in that conversation was so empowering and stirring for me when I watched that I immediately, when we had this opportunity, Sophia and I were in conversation, Professor Noble and I were in conversation, we said, we need to bring this to campus and empower our own conversations, our own scholarly, professional, and activist practice. So, with that introduction, thank you so much for being here. I'm so honored that you came and, you know, let this be the start of an ongoing relationship. Yeah. And let me just ask you to speak. You know, we're going to focus in on questions of information and activism, but let me just start by asking Professor Abdullah, if I can ask you about your involvement with Black Lives Matter, where it comes out of, just because not all of us might know this, and how it connects to your own work as a scholar and activist.
Sure. So thank you, and there's one piece that Professor Noble didn't share. We became really fast friends on this panel, and so after we started talking initially, do you remember this? We stopped paying attention to the panel and started texting each other for the remainder. I was like, wait, did they ask me something? So I'm very glad to be in space with you. It took us a while, but I'm very glad to be in space with you. Love you too. And so I'm thankful to be here, thankful that you have this kind of frame, because a lot of times as scholars, we don't always talk about what our role is. And so I'm of the firm belief that whatever position you occupy in this world, whatever it is you have at your disposal, that's supposed to be for the liberation of our people. You're not supposed to be doing work just so you can catapult yourself or enrich yourself as an individual. Our jobs are to contribute to the world, to make a better world. And now, especially, right, we have to commit ourselves to that. We can't be holding on to titles or holding on to spaces like this or holding on to privilege and thinking that that's meant for us and our families, right? That's meant for everyone. So I'm thankful that that's the frame that we're coming at this with. And so I'll share just kind of my quick BLM story. So I'm from Oakland, California. And I was born in the 70s, but I'm still 29, so don't let the math fool you. But everybody, this is just you can look it up later, information studies, you'll research it, right? Everybody in Oakland in the 1970s has a degree of consciousness, period, right? That's just the way it is. We are the Panther Cub generation, and you cannot be born in Oakland in the 1970s and be have your eyes closed, right? And so it was normal to me. My parents were always very active in their communities, in our community, in different ways. So my father was a labor organizer. He was a carpenter. He was very active in his labor union. My mother, many folks wouldn't consider her an activist, but my mother was one of the community other mothers. She was an elementary school teacher who, my parents divorced when I was young, and she was a single mom, but as soon as she hit the block, she drove an old Volvo station wagon so you could hear it like 2 blocks away. All the kids would hear her car hit the block and they come running to our house and yell, "Time for school!" And they like sit on the front porch, and my mom taught all the kids in our neighborhood, and I'm from East Oakland, I'm not from the hills, right? Taught all the kids to read, right? And so that was her work, that she was one of the mothers of the community. So this is the kind of space that I come from. And so when I was raised to when we see injustice, you do something. You don't just keep your mouth closed. You don't just go, that's wrong. You don't just feel bad later. You don't even just pray about it, right? You go do something. Do something. In that moment, do something, right? And so I've been involved in many different, what Brenda Stevenson talks about, right, from UCLA, talks about is episodic organizing. So I've been involved in a lot of different uprisings. So Oscar Grant, I was part of that organizing. I just moved to LA when Margaret Mitchell was killed. And so I've been part of that work. And so when Trayvon Martin's killer got off, when George Zimmerman was acquitted in the killing of Trayvon Martin, I don't know if you all remember, but you should. You all remember that day?
Yes.
Okay. So when that happened, my brother calls me, and I think maybe even though we know that almost every time they get off, right, there's still this kind of hope, at least on the part of Black people. We keep going, well, maybe this time will be different, right? And so I felt that about this one, and I was wrong. And when my brother called me and said that Zimmerman, his words were, because I'd left the house, we'd stopped watching TV in LA because it had become evening in Los Angeles, and it's summertime evening. You're thinking it's not going to happen on a Saturday at night. They're gonna wait till Monday, right? And so I had left the house, and my brother calls, and his words were, he got off, and they're giving him his gun back. And it hit me, and I'm a mom, I was sharing with you, I'm a single mom of 3 kids, and my son looks like Trayvon Martin, like literally, not like how Obama said if I had a son he'd look like Trayvon Martin. Like my son actually, Arena can attest to this, our man actually reminds you of Trayvon. And so for me, it hit me in a really kind of visceral way. And so I took my kids home, and I did what other moms do. I fed them, bathed them, put them to bed, and then called all my other Black mamas, and 3 others. And we sat on my couch and said, okay, well, we know what we're gonna do. And we went out into the streets, and for those of you, it's only a few Black folks in the room, so I'm gonna let y'all in on a Black secret, okay? Anytime something goes down in LA, Black people go to one place. Where we go?
Lamar Park.
Lamar Park. Should I have not told them? I should have kept that. No, I'm not even. Yeah. So we don't need a flyer. We don't need a tweet. We know where we going, right? So we went to Lamar Park, and there were hundreds of people already in the park. And I remember having a bullhorn. And so if you all are organizers or becoming organizers, invest in a bullhorn. Like there's power that comes with the bullhorn. So I had the bullhorn. And we're milling around in the park, and I remember there's this one young sister there who was 19, I think she said she was. And she said, I don't want to just stay in the park. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And she said, I want to march. So I grabbed the bullhorn. So we gonna march, right? And the thing that was really important for me is that if you go, there was a group who wanted to go south. So Lamar Park sits on Crenshaw and Vernon, right? And there was a group who wanted to go south. If you go south down Crenshaw, it gets blacker and poorer, right? If you go north of Crenshaw, eventually you'll dead into Wilshire, right? So it was really important for me that we not go south. If we went south, nobody really cared what happened. But if we went north, we were going to make the structure that killed Trayvon Martin real nervous, right? And they actually had all the police I can imagine lined up at King Boulevard making sure we didn't get north, right? We ducked and dodged and made it past them, but we marched north up Crenshaw. So we marched, and just to sum it up, we marched that night, but then we came back out night after night. And then on the third day, I got a text message from a sister who you all may have heard of named Patrice Cullors, who's one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. And I'd been in an organizing group with her, and we'd become friends for, a couple of years. And she said, the text actually went through, and I said one day I'm gonna do a slide with her name on it because it's difficult to spell it every time. It actually went through a journalist sister that I know named Tandisizwe Chimaranga. Do you all know her work?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Tandisizwe is hugely important. If you're not following her on social media, please do. We know that information is filtered, right? So it comes through different voices. Black independent voices are hugely important. Voices like Tandi's are hugely important. So Tandisizwe and I had organized around Oscar Grant, so she forwards me this text from Patrice that I always imagine to read like a message from the Underground Railroad. That it whispered, that it said, meet at 9 p.m. in St. Elmo's Village, right? And so I get this text, and I'm out now in the streets with my students. So I had a couple dozen of my students from Pan-African Studies out there with me. I forward the text to them, and we all go to St. Elmo's Village that third night. I guess it was February 15th. We go to St. Elmo's Village, which is a Black artist community, and we convene, and that's the first meeting of Black Lives Matter. A lot of people don't know that Black Lives Matter was founded right here in Los Angeles. And there were at most 30 of us who circled up that night at St. Elmo's Village and committed, as we were outside doing this intuitive organizing, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and Patrice Cullors had been in conversation about how to make this not just another episode, how to make this a movement rather than just a moment. And so that night, that's what we committed to, is making it a movement, not a moment. So sorry for the long story,
I love it.
but that's what happened.
I mean, that's exactly where I wanted to go, which is part of the mechanisms by which Black Lives Matter was able to transform and grow and magnify, apart from its just the sort of profound justice associated with the movement, but the mechanisms, right? Like the informational mechanisms by which it has grown to the extent it has. So that's like one side of the story that I'd love to know more about. But then another side of the story is the campaign of disinformation around Black Lives Matter, which folks like Sean Hannity and others, and he whose name shall not be said in this room, have called terrorist movements, right? And so in this moment where information can propagate and be part of aiding the growth of a social movement, yet also be part of aiding the growth of movements that are attempted to denigrate and denounce and label, how are we going to fight that battle? How are you all fighting that battle? And how can we think of being of service to it? It's a lot to ask, but...
Yeah, that is a big question. Yeah. I think that first all of us need to step back and think about what these claims and assaults on Black Lives Matter are about, right? So when they call us different things, right, and I've just recently committed to not repeating what they say we are, right? I just committed. I used to restate it up until like Monday. And I said I should stop saying that, right? I think that we need to step back and think about what they're saying and why they're saying it, right? So the idea that those who dare to say don't kill our people are somehow engaging criminally by saying, before I walked up, I just grabbed one, my backpack makes a jiggling noise because I have pins. Let me see. I'll grab it as I'm talking. But there's this one brother on social media who decided that his contribution is going to be that every time someone is killed by the police, he makes pins for them, right? And so my backpack is full of pins, right? So this is the first one I grabbed, but there's probably 10 or 20 in there of different people who were killed by police. So this one's Riddell Jones. And we know that she's a 30-year-old black mother who was shot in the back was it August? No. Was it August, Dorena? Yeah, it was August. August of last year. Oh, it says on the pin, I think. August of last year. And she was accused of stealing $80 from a pharmacy. She had 2 children, Sakari and D'Artagnan, who are 13 and 9. And, the work that we do is for her and for her children, right? So the notion that when we step up, when we say, you know what, traffic's not going to get through right now. You know what, you're not going to shop for Christmas right at this moment because they don't have a mama, The idea that that's the criminal act, not that the police who killed her are the criminals, that's really a warped way. It's a inhumane way of seeing the world. And so it's important that we push back against that narrative, which is why I won't repeat what they call us. I will say that Black communities are occupied and terrorized by a policing system that is supposed to, that their rhetoric is protect and serve, but that's never what it's been for Black people. And so I think it's really important that we tell our own stories. It's really important that not just the folks who are stopping the freeways, not just the folks who, and you all should have ways to get involved that were passed to you, not just the folks who come out Tuesday to police commission meetings every single Tuesday, who do like I do. I had to change my teaching schedule, so I don't teach Tuesday mornings anymore, right? So that I can be there every Tuesday, right? So not just the 40 of us who fill that room every Tuesday are telling the story, but you retell the story, right? What the right wing has going for them is the words and the ideas, if you can call them that, right? The lies are retold and retold over and over and over by many different voices. We need to do that. It has to be not just radicals. It has to be UCLA professors, right? UCLA students, right? It has to be people who are just regular folks. White folks, y'all gotta say it, because when we say it, right, they say, oh, that's just Black folks. Black folks always wild out, right? And we do, and I'm proud of that, right? I'm proud that Black people won't just be quiet and take it, right? But we need you to echo it. We need you to amplify that voice. And so I think that's how we push back against that narrative.
Right. And right now there's this moment, right, that's like set in publicly where people are concerned with, even all of us and how we try to circulate information via locked down corporate proprietary social media, right? Like I post things on my Facebook wall and it creates this kind of hysteria of agreement. Generally, I mean, we're all more complex than just being the same on our social media walls. Like, let's take that down. But, it's hard for me to have friends that politically disagree with me around such profound issues of justice, such as this. So, one of the big challenges right now at this moment, and I don't think it's a technological solution, but I want to hear your thoughts, are 2 things. One, how posting things online might actually be a form of slacktivism, right? Kind of putting things up, you're kind of a slacker. And the other is how posting information through these various networks may not necessarily aid the cause of building a social movement, but actually empower various systems of surveillance and monitoring. And I'm just really curious to hear how you all are thinking about those dilemmas that are, I think, really set in at this moment, and how we can move past some of those. It's another big question.
It is, so writing part of it down, right? So I think that the social media piece we need to recognize as a really invaluable tool in movement building, right? So I don't agree with this whole notion of slacktivism. I think that it's a first step that a lot of people take, right? So good, take that step. The second step is arguing with the people who don't agree with you, right? So do that, then defriend them, right? But I think that it will also challenge you to think about what it is you believe. So I teach a series of classes on activism. And one of the things that I learned about a year in, most organizers will do like these organizing scaffolds. I'm sure many of you have learned, like objectives, goals, right, vision, that kind of thing. For me, it's really important that we develop visions of what freedom looks like, in this moment especially. So, like, Black Lives Matter has this model of organizing that we call the disrupt build model, right? So shutting down freeways, shutting down malls, camping out in front of City Hall for 54 days, right? Going to the mayor's house, that's all disruption. We like doing that. It's actually really, really fun, so you should engage with us sometimes. The disruption is really important because we recognize that what we're experiencing isn't even just the one whose name shall not be spoken, right? It's not any individual. It's not even, I'll say his name. I love going after Eric Garcetti. I know some of y'all like him over on the side of town. I love going after him. I love going after these liberals, right, who wear skinny jeans and do yoga and, say I have a black friend at the dinner table, right? I love going after them because that's not freedom work, right? That's making you feel good about yourself work. I love going after them, right? But it's more than just the individual, right? It's more than my personal enjoyment. We get fulfillment from doing this, right? From calling Chief Beck names, right? It's fun, right? But we also recognize that they're upholding a whole system that's meant to oppress us, right? So in recognizing that, we know that Manning Marable talks about how the systems that we live under are intentionally built to be this way, to produce the outcomes that they do, right? And so if we recognize that, we have to disrupt those systems, but the other thing that we have to do is build alternative models. So we disrupt and then we build, right? And we build simultaneously, right? So I think in this moment, it's really important to think about what it is you want to build. For me, the only way I can get there is through meditation. I don't know what your practices are, but you gotta still yourself and think about, well, what does, and it might sound corny, right? But I think it's important. I think it's important to say, well, what does freedom look like for real? Like, what does it look like through your eyes, right? Not just, theoretically, like I'm a Marxist or I'm a Trotskyist, and then you get them in the room and they bicker over books, right? No, what does freedom look like? What does it sound like? What sounds do you hear, right? What does it smell like, right? It doesn't smell like downtown, right? Those kinds of things, we have to have that so that we can begin to work towards that kind of world. And so I think that once you kind of engage in the social media stuff, you can take the next step of thinking about that, building that vision, and then working towards it. The last thing I'll say on this question is just one of the things that happens if you don't have a vision, right? If you don't have a build model, is you're swayed and told what the people du jour are, what the issue du jour is, right? So, Black Lives Matter, I was talking to, I don't know if she's still here, another professor here about Black Lives Matter, and she was saying she wanted to do a conference, but there's so much other stuff going on right now. And I said, no, it's really important that we do the conference now, because what they're trying to tell us, right, if we think about what happened in August, they said, you know, now black people don't matter, now it's no Dakota Access Pipeline, right? Then they say now it's not that, now it's women, as if black people and indigenous people don't come in both genders, right? But now it's women, right? And then you're told now it's immigration. And then you're told now it's Muslims, right? Well, first of all, you know, you can be all of those things at the same time, right? In fact, I'm most of those things at the same time, right? But second of all, like, freedom means freedom. Right? Freedom means freedom for all of those groups. And so in developing your vision, you refuse to still say Black Lives Matter, right? Still say, you know, don't let them tell you you can't talk about the Muslim ban no more, right? Because there's a temporary restraining order and now you can talk about, who are we supposed to talk about now? Elizabeth Warren, right? We're supposed to be talking about that now. Right. So you have to figure out where you want to go. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's a really long
No, it's fantastic. I mean, and one aspect I think that's really powerful to think about is culture jamming, right, as a mechanism, which is sort of to insert Black Lives Matter types of conversations and consciousness into other types of conversations, sometimes in funny ways. That's like a classic strategy of like activist media organizing. That actually just relates to, I just have two more questions and then we're going to open it up. This is really about exactly what you just mentioned about how a movement that's inclusive yet legitimately grounded in Black Lives Matter ideals and values and beliefs, how that movement actually can start to emerge, right? So part of that movement emerging is finding mechanisms of gaining support, maybe not from enemies of Black Lives Matter, but allies who may not even know that they're allies yet, right? And building it out from there, particularly in this moment where there's so much hysteria because there are attacks on civil liberties and civil rights on so many different levels. That's just to start things. So how do we try to think about an inclusive movement that grows out of the types of actions that you all are taking? And you mentioned you're imagining this sort of new world, if you will. What does that start to look like, and how do we get there?
What does the world look like, and how do we get there? No, I can't answer that part, right? But I'll try. Right. I think that in terms of building an inclusive movement, so I'll start with that. So Black Lives Matter takes a different approach that's really rooted in kind of Black power, Black radical traditions, right? This idea that if we're talking about building a movement that really gets us to freedom, it means that we have to be unapologetic about who we are and what we want, right? So it can't be about what we call white tears, right? It can't be about making people who are uncomfortable with my blackness feel comfortable, right? It has to start with saying we want freedom for Black people and not giving in to, you all know the back and forth debate when we say Black Lives Matter, what do they say?
All lives matter.
Right, which is some bullshit, right? Which is really, them saying Black lives don't matter. It's really saying everybody's life matters but yours, right? And so for us to push back against that, not to kind of give in to that, I think is the starting point. So when you talk about an inclusive movement, we want a different kind of inclusivity. We want people who are willing to get down with us, like really get down with us, right? So we have ally groups. The white allies that work with us are called White People for Black Lives, and they're dope. And they hashtag John Brown 2017, right? We want allies like that. You gonna be John Brown with it, then we rolling, right? But if you are just gonna have the Black friend at the dinner table, that's not the kind of false inclusivity that we want. And so I think that when we talk about a world that has to be transformed, right? And so, when I'm kind of messing with these liberals, right? It's because they don't believe in transformation, right? They're really just saying things that are a little reformist that make everybody feel like, well, maybe they're okay and make them feel good about themselves, right? Look, they just finished the homeless count in Los Angeles, right? We got 50,000 people who are living outside, right? If this were any other nation on earth, right? Have you all gone to Skid Row? Have you been there? If this were any other nation, it would be the world community would be going, this is ridiculous, this cannot be. There would be a global outrage. But instead, we allow that to happen, right? So the world can't just be reformed. The reason I mess with people like Eric Garcetti is because he'll say things like there's a homeless crisis and then pour money into police to criminalize the people who are homeless. Not to criminalize the conditions that created their homelessness, right? But to say, you don't have a home, let's send you to jail, right? For sleeping in your car. Y'all saw this news? Yeah. So we have to work towards transformation. So that kind of movement building has to be courageous in its inclusivity, right? A willingness to transform together, right?
And it actually reminds me when I saw Angela Davis speak recently, and she described All Lives Matter as what she called the tyranny of singularity, right? You have the singularity of all, but all has always been, unequal, right? All always meant that Black people had less power and were criminalized and much worse. The last question I want to ask are about threats to the movement. It's grown so much. So many people are increasingly connected to it and feel a kinship like ourselves to this. And sort of threats that are anticipated by organizers from this new administration on down to the local administration. You mentioned some. And just sort of strategies that you all, insofar as you feel free sharing, strategies that you all have in terms of growing and mobilizing and even possibly transforming institutional power, right? When I saw you in person, you mentioned you would not, Black Lives Matter formally would not support any of the candidates, and that was during the primary, better days than now. What's your thoughts on that?
On the
threats
okay.
of transformation.
So there's threats, there's always threats. We're surveilled, right? You talked about social media being used as surveillance. Yes, we're surveilled. Our phones are, we know what's happening when our phones die, even though they're on 80%, right? We know the technology, we're aware of all, how technology is being used. We're also aware of how the state uses its power to try to intimidate us, right? So right after the inauguration, there were marked police cars on every entrance at the end of the block, every entrance to my house, right? We know that. We know. Come on, why y'all sitting there? In fact, I have one on video, an unmarked car the week before, sitting there, and I guess I got home earlier and they were slacking, right? So I made a U-turn and I turned my phone on and I had my 13-year-old film them while I interrogated them, all right? We know it's happening. The thing is, we can't let them scare us. We can't let them scare us. They try to come at us. Arena, who's also a member of Black Lives Matter LA, she'll vouch for me that when we were camped out in front of City Hall, they tried to use police first, right? There was a stingray.
On a Sunday afternoon, late in the afternoon, there's no business going on. If you know Main Street, there's one way. Most people that park there are police cars and people then out making deliveries. Had a stingray maybe 50 yards up from where the encampment was. We thought it was maybe news people. So we kind of I said, something's not right. We go there, Melina's like, yeah. I said, no, I went around. I said, there's a guy inside looking at a monitor. I said, the monitor is people. I said, so we went, she tapped.
I knocked on the
Yeah,
door.
Right.
Right.
She was Yeah, I was waiting on news. Are you LAPD? Are you police? He said she slammed the door. It's on YouTube. So
yeah,
verify
so I
exactly
mean, we
what
know
they do.
that there's that kind of surveillance. So it was a straight up stingray. He didn't expect us to ask him, "Are you the police?" And so, you know, when people aren't expecting you to ask them, right, they don't have the lie ready. So he just said, "Yeah, right."
FBI.
So it starts with that, but then they think about other ways to intimidate you. So all of the moms got threatened that if we were out there with our children, that DCFS was going to come and take our children, right? So there's threats that range from sending you to jail. Most of us have cases, right? Sending you to jail, to surveilling you, to disrupting your families, right? The thing is, I'm doing this for my kids, right? I'm doing this because my son looks like Trayvon, right? I'm doing this because we have to, right? So we all have to. Those things can't intimidate us. We have to be fearless. We have to be courageous. And we have to say, you know what? So what? It's not the worst thing in the world. Let me tell you, the first time I went to jail, I was a little scared, right? After that, I really don't care. It's not that bad, right? Like, I don't want to go, let me say, I don't want to go for no long period of time, right? But, you know, it's not the end of the world. So what? So you go to jail, you just don't eat the bologna, right? You good, right? I mean, we have to think about what it is we're willing to give up, right? Even if and this is the last thing, even if I think about this a lot as a single mom, even if I lose my job, right? Because I'm the only caregiver for my children, right? Even if I lose my job, I got a mama, I'll go sleep on her floor, right? Whatever. If it's really about the freedom of our people, if it's really about, I mean, this stuff, are you listening to what this fool is saying? You know, so either you take it, I like your shirt, right? What's your shirt say? What's the top?
It says
Femmes against fascism. Right. So if you really believe he's a fascist, right, which he is, like for real, we used to throw that term around. Professor, what do you go by now? Fraser Yoakley? Professor Fraser Yoakley will help me. In political science, we used to kind of use fascism and say maybe this is a but it was not, that was not fascism that we were looking at before. This is fascism, right? So if you don't want to live under this kind of regime, what you gonna do? What are you gonna give up, right? What are you gonna contribute? What are you gonna risk, right? Regardless of what they threaten.
Thank you. Let's open it up. I will hand deliver this to our first. Anyone want to ask a question or comment? Yes. Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming here today and sharing with us. My name's Michelle Uri. I was actually one of the co-founders of Insight. So along with Critical Resistance, we've been working alongside you, I think, for time. And I just wanted to get in a question really quick because I brought my class today. Queer things, can you pop your hands up? All right. So we're looking at archives, and I've been thinking about this movement and the self-archiving, the images, the role that images have been playing. You brought up the button. One of my students is going to analyse an ACT UP button. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how we document our movements and how our movements become congealed within objects, artifacts, and what we can do to preserve those and take care of them and ourselves at the same time. Thank you.
Oh, I need a mic. So thank you for bringing. Is it still on? No.
Yeah, it's on, but it's a little flaky.
Okay. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So one, thank you for bringing your class, and thank you for your work. So we're horrible at documenting our movements, right? Arena is the best one because she always has a camera and she'll post it, but very few of us document what it is we're doing. So when you are woke scholars, can you help us with that? We need that, right? Like we need you to do that, and not for your career, right? We don't need no more of those folks who say, oh, this is a hot subject. I'm gonna write a book on it. I'm not gonna ever get out in the streets, right? There's books out that talk about Black Lives Matter being founded in 2014. We were founded in 2013, right? Like, that's even horrible scholarship, right? We need you to be real engaged scholars and help us with this documentation, because you can't do it and document it at the same time, right? Yeah.
Bring a girl GoPro.
Thank you so much. My question was, I loved what you quoted Manning Marivelle, and were saying basically that systems are intentionally oppressive. And one of the things I think about a lot is that law is the scaffolding of oppressive systems. You set a law, and it's almost like a self-organizing system that arises up around it, so that even if that law is repealed, the scaffolding is taken away, but the building remains.
Right.
And I was thinking also about...
Did you write that down? Because that was brilliant. Tweet that. Tweet it.
Yeah, well, it's being recorded. It's documented.
Like, say your name so nobody steals it.
No, that's okay. Open source. Take the idea and use it.
Okay.
But then I'm also thinking about, the idea that if our systems are intentionally corrupt, and we're thinking about transformation, and you were talking about imagining freedom, what does that look like? A lot of times freedom's also, what does it look like, sound like, smell like? The smells, sounds, looks that we have, those are based in law too. So how do we tackle and pull down those systems if we are also not engaged? If we can't trust our politicians who are the lawmakers, and
Why
we're...
are the sights, sounds, and smells based in law?
So I'm thinking about, for example, I grew up around Leimert Park, and one of the things you always hear in the skies at night are helicopter circling. I moved to the west side to be close to my job. I haven't heard a helicopter in the 2 years that I've lived there. And that is, maybe it's not an official law, but that's written down policy somewhere,
Right.
how often we're gonna do those, police sweeps that make it sound like you're in Iraq versus sounding, like you're on the west side. The way that, the trash pickup, all the things, that kind of make the texture of our reality, those are things that in some way they circle back to a law or a policy or a memo of some kind, right? Again, going back to that structure. And so to me, and I'm a lawyer, so sorry about that, although I've transitioned into teaching. But I think about, those laws are part of that intentionally oppressive system. If we're working outside of the system because we see it as corrupt, are we going to pull everything down, or how can we infiltrate the system and use law to our advantage? I guess that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. What's your name?
Lauren Nichols.
Lauren, okay. We need you.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, all right. We need you in the, okay. Yeah, okay.
We'll talk.
All right. So I think it's really important that when I was talking about visioning, I'm not kidding about like coming out of a meditative state, right? The institutions that we're in train us to respond to what is, right? So you say, I don't want to live in a place that smells like urine, right? Like that's what downtown smells like, urine, right? I don't want to hear the helicopters, right? I don't want to see bars on my window, right? Those are all responses to what is, right? When we are really in a space of vision, we don't begin with what we don't want, right? We're in a fully imaginative space, right? So if you come out of meditation, and I don't know if you meditate or not, right? And you just start to write or start to vision or start to paint or whatever helps you to kind of document, express and save that image of freedom, right? It's not a response that you're looking for, right? So like if we were not at UCLA, if you were like somewhere with me right now, I would actually do it. I would turn off the lights and say, let's meditate, and then have you write, right? Or whatever, or draw, or whatever you need to do to write that vision of freedom down. When I do this sometimes with my students. it begins like universally, there's grass or greenery like nature. It's, there's always water. Almost always there's children's laughter, right? Sometimes there's specific smells. So the last time I did it was a week and a half ago, and we had smells of jasmine, collard greens, and like different feel. Like even when you think about Lamert, there's spaces in Lamert that feel like freedom. Because when you said what I hear is helicopters, that's not what I thought of. When you said what I hear, I was like drums.
Right.
Right? So what is freedom for you? Right? So rather than just responding, what is freedom? Now, how do we get to freedom? That's the huge question, right? That's the question we've been, as African people, we've been trying to figure out how to get free since we were stolen, right? And we have to keep figuring it out. We're moving, right? We were stalled like from the 80s to like now. We were stalled, right? We were thinking like if we behave like Bill Cosby, that's freedom. And we knew like intuitively it wasn't. But I think we're in a space where we're moving. But I don't know what the answer is. I just know we got to keep moving.
There are some social justice oriented meditation groups here in Los Angeles, and if any of you are curious about that, I know of some as well.
Thank you for being here. My name is Anna Marie Francois, and I am with a K-12 educator development unit here at UCLA. And oftentimes in our department, we talk about the role of scholarship and scholars in the struggle and in the movement. I wonder if you have any comments or insights into what you see as the role of public education and K-12 educators, given our unique position within schools and in communities and in supportive families.
Yeah. So let me say I am loving public school teachers right about now. UTLA is killing it.
Yeah.
UTLA is like, so we've been in partnership with them for about 1.5 years now, maybe 2 years. And I actually worked with UTLA before on the ethnic studies push, right? I think that many public school teachers, especially like active union members, have gotten to the point where they don't really care. Like they're putting their jobs on the line. So there's this, I'm sure you're aware of Schools LA Students Deserve, right? So the work that is being done, Schools LA Students Deserve is a partnership between classroom teachers, other educators, parents, and it's student-led. And so they've done a lot of work around what does freedom look like for them. The campaign that we're currently on is ending random searches in schools, which is so the students thought that that's all they could get is ending random searches in schools. I don't know, do y'all know about random searches in schools?
Yeah.
Who knows about them? Who does not know about them? Okay, so I'm gonna quickly tell y'all that especially in Black and brown schools, our students are being stopped and frisked, not at lunchtime, not walking to school, then too, but in the classroom. At schools like Dorsey, they're being pulled out as they're taking exams. And they're saying it's random. It's almost all Black kids being pulled out, right? Being physically searched by officers with guns, right, who then send them, and let me tell you what they're looking for. They're not just looking for drugs and weapons. They're looking for crap like whiteout, which is banned, highlighters, and hand sanitizer, right? This is, am I lying?
No, you're not.
This is what they're doing. And so the students said, well, if we could just end the random searches, and we're sitting around the table going, forget the random searches, let's get the police out of schools completely, right? But the students were like, I think we can win this year, right? So we were moving on that campaign, and then all of a sudden Shirley Weber picked up on it, and she's pushing a bill now to get police out of schools. So I think it's really beautiful how a lot of the teachers are saying, well, Monique Morris talks about this, right? Like education is freedom work, right? So education is freedom work. So if you are going to be an educator, that's a sacred space. That's part of our duty as freedom fighters to be good teachers, right? To tell the truth, but also teach the truth. How do you get power, right? How do you push for the empowerment of your people and teach these kids in your classrooms that they have power and they have voice? And so I love the work that's being done. Yeah.
I think we can take two more.
Talk a little bit about police body cameras. Curious to know your thoughts on.
I hate police body cameras. I mean, quickly, and you all should follow Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. So if you want to know how technology is working against us, working to surveil and repress our activism, Stop LAPD Spying Coalition does the best work on that. Body cameras, if you think about it, are really ridiculous, right? So we're spending all these tens of millions of dollars now to put cameras on officers that only shoot from the perspective of the officer, that they can turn on and off at will, where they get to then, in LA and in most cities, they get to review the footage before they write their reports, which actually helps them to tell better lies. And then we're all duped into thinking it's the answer, as if Tamir Rice wasn't killed on camera, as if Eric Garner wasn't killed on camera, as if Walter Scott wasn't killed on camera, Oscar Grant. We could go on and on to say that folks are getting killed on camera, and it doesn't produce a higher rate of charging or convicting the officers who assail and kill our people.
Take one more here.
First of all, thank you for being with us and talking to us. I wanted to touch on one or two things you said during your talk, and I'm sorry to I guess break the linguistic taboo that's been observed here, but you were talking about unfriending Trumpists on Facebook, and then you went on and were kind of talking about how, I think what you called skinny jean liberals.
Yoga. Skinny jean
Yoga skinny jean liberals. And how I got the sense that you maybe try a little harder to convey the message to them. But having grown up around people like that for the first however many years of my life, I'm not sure that I feel like they're any closer to getting on board with the message that Black Lives Matter is trying to bring to the forefront than the Trumpists. I wonder how you think about that.
I think you're right. I mean, I think you're right. I think that's why I said I don't mind going after Garcetti if I have to, right? And we have to, right? I think it's important that people are pushed, and when people are pushed, they either, go to the other side, or they recognize that they have to move to our side, right? So we gotta push. We can't let it go. We have to shine a light. Just because somebody's an easier pill to swallow doesn't mean that they're not doing damage, right? And I think that this, and I don't want to talk too long for this final thought, but I think that this presidential campaign revealed a lot of that for us, right? Like, they tried to tell us you either get Trump or you get Clinton. Well, a lot of us couldn't get enthusiastic about Clinton. She's a war hawk, right? She don't like black people either, right? Or anybody else, right? She's for rich folks too. She's for capitalism too, right? And so if you want to really be real about it, right, that's why we have to kind of say we want transformation, not reform, right? If you want to be real about it, we have to challenge those folks, the people that you grew up around. We have to say, look, you come with us or you don't, right? If we go back to that whole John Brown kind of ally, right? If you ain't providing no safe house, if you ain't, if you turning in enslaved people who trying to get their freedom, it doesn't matter that, you gave us some water on our way to the slaughterhouse, right? whatever, right? You are the enemy, right? So we need to push people to either be our allies and get down with us in the way that we need them to get down with us. Or just say, you know, I'm just the lightweight version of Trump. I just don't wear a sheet. How about that, right? Yeah.
And on that amazing note, please thank Professor Abdullah.